get a buyer, find a property, wrap a listing. And that's going to make a little bit more sense here as we go. But simply put, I find this the best way to get paid twice. So, as most of you do here, you have a buyer, right? You have somebody that's seen most of the things on market. They demonstrated that they're motivated to pull the trigger, and they've narrowed down their search to a specific neighborhood, specific price range, and other homes in that specifics. But besides that, for waiting for a new property to hit the market, what else can you do? Like, instead of just saying like, oh, I'll check MLS every day and I'll set you up on auto notifications, what can you do? Spoiler opportunity. This is an opportunity to leverage what you already have into getting a dual-sided deal. Like, honestly, you have a buyer. That is an asset. Let's use that to get a listing and pair it the opposite way around and get paid twice. So you have a buyer. Now let's go find the property. And with an off-market property hunting, every house is a potential sale. So how do you find that off-market? Door knocking, but not door knocking with the, hey, I'm selling the house down the street. It's like, hey, I have a buyer looking in your neighborhood. Are you ever willing to sell? Dropping letters, cold calling, all that sort of thing. I have a buyer. It immediately demonstrates value. It's not something as simple as, hey, I'm just interested in your neighborhood or I'm starting to farm it. It's like, no, legitimately, I have somebody that might bring you an offer tomorrow. I actually successfully pulled a listing calling on an Airbnb ad one time. I looked up the Airbnb ad. I saw the property. I saw that it had a lot of empty space in there, like all the dates were available to book. And I looked up the owner online, said like, would you ever be willing to sell this property? And she said, yeah, I'd meet with you tomorrow. And I ended up going and getting the listing out of it. So this is a really cool way to do it. Like, approaching sellers. I have a buyer, but now what? So here are some ways you can do it. You can look them up on sites, mojosells.com, Property Radar, Forewarn, People Search. Like, these are the looking up stuff. And title lookups, the Pro Farm. You can do direct mail companies like Yellow Letter HQ, Handwritten, Corefact. And what those do is they basically spam a neighborhood and say, I have a buyer looking for this specific thing. Yada, yada, 1 and 2. Would you ever be interested in selling this property to my buyer? If so, please call me. Alternative methods to contacting. You can text message people, no automations, GMass email, door knocking. I already said that. People you're looking to engage with. Owners who have owned for 10 years but own 2 stories that are ideal candidates for downsizing. Absentee owners. An area like mine, Bay Area owners since 2020, because they bought a second home during COVID, and then they're not really using it anymore now that they're back in the office and working, not longer working remotely. So that's like who we have. And you don't be afraid to just go out and say like, oh, I have a buyer. I'm in this neighborhood. Don't keep it a secret. I have a buyer. Tell everybody I have a buyer. Word of mouth gets around. Your mom will be like, well, my Aunt Sue is thinking about it, or Joe's friend. So, okay, people know you have a buyer and you've engaged with the seller. I'm interested. Like, you have a buyer. I have a property I'm going to sell. Let's do this. You're going to go meet the sellers, but it's not a listing pitch. You're going there on behalf of your buyer, right? Take the pressure right off. You're not going to bring a listing presentation. If I'm contacting these people and saying like, I have a buyer for you, I don't want to come in with a listing pitch. That's immediately going to put up their red alert and be like, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't say you could list my home. I want to go in and drop little things like, well, if I was your agent and I had a fiduciary responsibility to you, I would give you this advice, but I'm not going to say anything along like, oh, I'm going to market your home or any of this. I'm going to go through and say, hey, can I take a video and walk it through? Keeping in mind that the videos should be no longer than 2 minutes, because then they can't text message. So if you have a 2 minute and 4 second video, it's going to get caught in a text message thread. And try to keep it to under 3 videos and just be a rough synopsis of the property, 2 minutes apiece. And then you agree with the sellers. Hey, my buyers, are you okay if I send these 3 videos to my buyers? Well, can I share them amongst my team, and et cetera? Like, obviously, most of the time they're going to say, don't go posting this on social media, anything along those lines. No, I'm just here to meet with you because you're a potential seller and I have a buyer that's interested. Now, showing your client the property. Immediately, what you're going to do is like, hey, by the way, I found this off market. Not only did I find it off market, I went and toured the home for you, pre-toured it, and I have some videos of it. I'm going to send them over to you. Now, some opportunities for you. You can say, potentially, we can set up a listing, or excuse me, potentially we can set up a tour of the property if the sellers are willing to vacate. Now, most of the time, the sellers are not going to be willing to vacate their home that's not prepped for sale, letting you, who they've only met once, walk through a stranger through your property with no agency relationship. But what you usually can do is you go back to your buyers and say, hey, listen, I've toured it. I think it could work for you. I'm not saying it's the one, but it could work. And offers are free. We can write an offer very loosely, subject to inspections and subject to previewing the property. And that'll get us into the front door. Now, it's a lot easier pill to swallow for the sellers in this situation if they met you and they've received an offer immediately after or within a couple of days saying, hey, they like what they've seen and they'd like to show the next steps. It's reverse engineering this process a little bit, but this is the most tried and true method. It shows, hey, we're real and ready to go. By the way, at this point in your buyer's journey, they've already seen everything else on the market. They're probably a little bit worn down. They've been beaten on other offers. They know that inventory is not working. So if they see that you found the property that fits their specs, that fits in their price range, they see 3 2-minute videos that pretty much surmise everything, and you tell them, hey, let's put together an offer. What's the worst case that'll happen? Most of the time in this point in their journey, they should be ready to at least try it. And they should at least trust you enough to do so. Bringing them off markets should also be an appealing thing to your buyers because it shows, hey, I'm hustling outside of the normal realm of things. Now, here comes the wrapping a listing agreement and what that means. You're able to do a listing agreement that only pertains to a singular offer. So let's say that I went and met with these sellers and they liked me and we had this great experience, but they're not ready to pot commit yet. They've only met me once. I haven't even told them about everything I do with that listing situation. They're not ready to commit with me yet. I can present and write up an offer, and I'll have my client sign that offer. Then I will write a listing agreement specifically for that offer, and I'll attach them both via DocuSign and send those attached documents to the sellers. And I'll say, hey, by the way, guys, my clients were very interested. I have a listing agreement for this specific offer and an offer attached, ready to go at your agreed upon price or whatever the terms may be. And I'm going to say we have 3 options at this point. You can accept, you can deny, and you can counter. Now, if you accept and sign this listing agreement for this specific offer, and this offer doesn't go through, you're not pot committed to me in any way, shape, or form. Keep in mind that I'm keeping this as low pressure for them as possible, right? They're coming to a point where, oh my God, somebody that I just met off the street yesterday showed up. They said they had a buyer. Next thing you know, they have an offer for me ready to go, and I don't even have to commit with them. And like, this is almost a too good to be true situation. But I'm telling you, opportunities like this do present themselves. And when things are clicking and buyers also, when they get an off-market opportunity like this, there's a scarcity law that's put into place and they want to take advantage of that because they're the only one that knows about it. And you're the only person that's going to be able to provide this opportunity. How do you wrap a listing agreement? You're going to submit a normal type form for the offer, the RPA, on your type form. Once you do that, you're also going to email the operations team at C2 Realty, and say, hey guys, I need to wrap this signed and accepted offer with a listing agreement for X property. When you say you're going to wrap it, They're going to put in the seller's names and everything along those lines, but they're not going to DocuSign it over to them at that point. They're just going to create the docs for you to sign on your side. They're going to put together the purchase agreement for the buyers to sign. And then we're going to merge all those documents into one form that cannot be manipulated and split up. So they can't take your offer and then go sign it with a different agent to represent them. And you're going to present it to the sellers to accept, deny, or counter. Now, if you go ahead and get those signed documents back and the sellers and the buyers agree, congratulations. You've just dueled your first property. You've taken what was an off-market property that you didn't have any prior commitment to, and you've taken a buyer that you've toured around, you've double dipped and got commission on both sides in a situation like this. I would say we probably do what, Kyle? 2 of these a year on average?
Oh, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, but too conservatively.
Too conservatively. I mean, that's just within our team, maybe 3, but it pads your stats considerably, guys, and it puts those listings under your belt, even if you don't have the bandwidth to go and say like, hey, I'm good enough to fight with every listing agent in town and I should be your representation. You've proven yourself if you're the buyer. Now, let's say your offer does not get accepted, right? Your buyer was not interested in offering, or something along those lines. You haven't gotten the signed docs. Now is when you start to transition over to your regular listing pitch. You've demonstrated value. You've showed your ability to bring a buyer. You've already started to forge this relationship, talking to them, hey, about my buyer, my buyer, my buyer. You've talked to them about the offer. You've shown all these things. And you can say things along the lines of, just because this one wasn't right for these buyers doesn't mean I can't find the right buyers. And the best way to get this listing in front of everyone is on the open market. And I'd love to tell you more about what I have to offer. I know that was a relatively quick one, but does anyone have any questions about the concept of this, of kind of reverse engineering and taking a buyer and then getting the listing specifically through that?
I have a question actually. So when you say that you attach the documents on that, so does that mean that the sellers cannot go through any of the listing agent but you by doing that?
Yeah. So we're presenting them together and I'm creating them all under one PDF formula. Now, of course, in theory, they could go tear it all apart and do a PDF, like manipulate it out and cut other documents out and then go respond to it with a seller counter with another one. Sure. But I've not seen that happen. I'm putting it all as one package deal when I present it. Like, hey, this is your offer with me as your representation.
Okay. Has it ever happened where they're like, we'd prefer to use somebody else, but we'd be more than happy to sell the home?
I have had one situation, one time, where I presented the agent, Austin can attest to this if Austin is on this one, over in Del Monte Beach, where I presented them this situation. She came back and said, well, I just signed a listing agreement after you sent me the offer with a different agent. And my clients actually decided to rescind the offer at that point too, because they didn't trust the situation. So yeah, you can get squeezed out of it, but it just is not nearly as likely at that point. Once you've performed that far into the process, usually you're not going to get screwed over at the end. Honestly, guys, if we're looking at the cards most of you are holding in your hands right now, most of you, if you go look at your scorecards, have A's and B buyers. What most of you don't have is listings. When you go to people when you're reaching out to people that are willing to sell and say, I have somebody that genuinely would buy this house, you're going to be able to close that gap very quickly. Like, it is going to work. It's going to use what you already have in your tool belt to a very effective and leverageable position. Does anyone have any questions about like how to go find those sellers when you have a buyer that would fit?
Cassie just asked, would you door knock this and just tell the seller, or do you have like a paper explaining what they're looking for?
Yeah, like when you're door knocking, and they open the door, like, are you just having a conversation, or are you also giving them like a CMA and a paper explaining what they're looking for? That's kind of what I was like wondering. How do you do it?
You can personalize this process. Most of the time we see this executed, and it's a relatively common formula. It's done by mass mailing. So what somebody will say is, I really want to buy in this condo complex. And then you'll go send out a mailer to all 100 condos, right? That's like the traditional means. When you have a buyer that's isolated on one thing, you go to work to find those off markets that fit their needs. Door knocking is even a step above and beyond. Hey, I have a buyer that's really looking in this area. How can I facilitate this for you? Door knocking and bringing more stuff, even if it was a family letter and an explanation about your buyers with pictures of your buyers, that's going a step further. Like that always resonates and helps. If you can include photos and a little description of who your buyers are, that'll really help.
No photos.
No photos?
No photos. It can bias the seller implicitly.
Yeah, there's
No
been
photos.
quite a few lawsuits coming down with buyer letters, especially with photos, basically fair housing and discrimination.
I wasn't aware of those happening in California, though. I thought that was primarily up in Washington. Was it in California?
Yeah, it's I'll show you something on it.
No photos. You learn something new every day.
I was told by the broker at Allison James, it doesn't matter if it's happening in another state. We have that federal fair housing disclosure addendum and car forms. So no photos, abide by it.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected on no photos.
But isn't it that that's only on the seller's side though, right? Like a buyer can provide whatever information they want. It's just if the seller lets it influence them, then it's the problem. And if you're both sides, then they would have a tough time proving that.
Yeah, in the listing agreement, there is a paragraph specifically asking the seller, do you want to receive buyer letters? And they have to answer yes or no to that. That protects you as the agent from that. So if they say, yes, I want to receive them, then the listing agent can receive them and hand them off to the seller. The buyer side, go for it, because, if you want to send it, go for it. However, if that seller has views that aren't favorable to that family or what that family looks like, they may not win that offer, for example. And if the buyer found out that they were discriminated against, that's where the lawsuit comes into play.
I think the simple answer here is don't include the photos. I have included photos in the past, and it's usually a cute young family, and I really lay into it and like, oh, this is their dog and their young kids, and it's but I understand that isn't playing into bias as well, and that's not okay. So I stand corrected, and I'm not encouraging photos in that, but yes, anything you can do to spice it up, Cassie, to get to your original question is obviously going to help. Always go the extra mile when that opportunity presents itself. Does this seem like something that any of you will actually put into practice or excited about, like a new idea and thought on it?
I think it's awesome. And it when you knock on somebody's door and say, I have an offer for your house, that's pretty powerful and pretty compelling. I think it's a great idea.
So what I wanted to say, just really quick, sorry to jump on, but also, like, even if you don't have those 100% buyers either, like even if you have a buyer that's maybe like 75% in, being able to say, I have a buyer, and then getting that listing is the most amazing part. And then after that, you know what? We all have buyers. Then you can bring it to us and say, hey, I have this. And then somebody through your team, it might work better through your team. So even if you have the buyer, it's good. Even if you think it's maybe not the best, but if you have a buyer, like we all have buyers, it's going to be able to be sold with somebody on our team too.
And to Jen's point, the people that she met these people at an open house, and she had a buyer that had even just told her, they hadn't even really looked at a lot of stuff. Hey, I'd be super interested in this. And she went on their behalf and met those people later today and had a really successful run of it.
So Cassie asked, are mailers expensive? So there's three primary type of mailers that I personally utilize. Number one would be postcards. Postcards are going to be your least expensive mailer. You can get them around 60 cents, I'd say, about per mailer. Maybe more if you're doing a really small volume. And then maybe slightly less if you're doing the mailing yourself, if you're not doing a company do it. Number two is a company that I like to use is called yellowletters.com. You can usually get them to do it for around $1.20 per mailer, depending on what your volume is. And then third option is the one that's the best response rate is through Celebrity Agent. If you have a buyer with a buyer rep agreement who is also pre-approved, the company will actually pay for those mailers for you. They're $1.75 per mailer. If you don't have that and you want to send them out on your own budget, then you can pay the $1.75 per mailer. They're highly targeted and they only go to specific houses that fit your buyer's criteria. And then the Celebrity Agent, what they do is they craft a really personalized message telling the seller about your buyer and basically eliciting response. And these mailers perform at a 2% response rate, which industry average for direct mail is 0.02%. So it performs incredibly higher than normal mailers. So they are higher costs, but the return is significantly better as well. So those are kind of your three primary options. Of course, if you're making the mailers yourself, you can get them for a little bit cheaper, but then you're buying envelopes, postage, and doing all that work. And so usually it is worth the cost to have a company do it for you.
Okay, what was the website, the company you like to use, Kyle?
Celebrity Agent is the expensive one. And then Yellow Letters HQ, I think is the exact URL. And then for postcards, I personally like Corfact. And then Cassie also asked, can you use Real Bucks? Absolutely. That's a great use of Real Bucks.
In addition to that, I mean, if no one else has any questions, I challenge any of you that are sitting around kind of wondering, hey, what should I do today that's going to help me further my real estate career? I don't have a full set of things to do today, but I do have somebody that would buy in these situations. I challenge you to go out and figure out a way to put yourself in front of a prospective seller and do both. I mean, honestly, this is a really, really high impact way to really maximize your time as well. And anyone you meet out in the field that potentially might be a seller, and you're demonstrating the value to them that, oh, yes, I already have a buyer that I'm working with in all those ways, this is only going to be a high interest yield results.